Let me tell you the story of Queso. Queso is an ordinary guy, just like anyone, a Japanese office worker with a passion for the games he loves. But what sets him apart is the depth of that passion. Roughly 17 years ago, Queso found himself in a situation I imagine a lot of us have at one point in time. His favorite genre of game was a bit niche and there were no new releases on the horizon. But instead of grumbling about it, Queso decided if it didn't already exist, he would make it a reality, and got cooking. He hit plenty of walls. He wasn't a game developer, so he had a lot to learn, and he was working on his passion project in his free time. There's a wealth of knowledge on game design available online now, but imagine what the situation was like almost 20 years ago. The going wasn't easy. He stumbled a few times, even having to step away from the project twice, but he always got back up and kept pushing, until finally all of the hard work paid off, as in February 2021, roughly 15 years after he began development, Queso released the free demo for one of my favorite JRPGs of all time. Astlibra is a side-scrolling action RPG with a heavy focus on combat and unique progression systems. Full of so much love and care and attention to detail, you'll feel it every single time you swing a sword, or solve a puzzle, or surprisingly even while you're farming. Astlibra Revision is a truly special game, but it's not going to be for everyone. You can really feel how Queso very much made it for people like him, for gamers like me, but Astlibra has so much to offer. I'd wager if you love JRPGs, it's worth your time, even if you've never heard of games like these. And look, right off the rip, I know there's a certain subset of people who are looking at this and immediately getting stunlocked by the graphics. While personally I find them rather charming, I get it. If you find yourself in that position though, remember Vampire Survivors. Kind of in that same vein, these graphics might look dated in a screenshot, but just feel right when your hands are actually holding the controller, so much so that it's hard to imagine it looking any other way. And getting your hands on it is really key, because that's where you'll start to realize how this game sets itself apart from almost any other you played. Remember I mentioned this is Queso's favorite genre? Well, it shows, because this combat is good. You've got a variety of options, a standard combo string alongside uppercuts, helm splitters, shield bashes, a guard, backstep, and more. Some of them unlocked from hidden chests spread throughout the game, and some through progression. Weapons can be broken down into a general archetype and a weight class, so two swords may have very similar swings, but one might be a bit heftier than the other. But even relatively early on, you'll start to find some fun outliers though, like this staff that fires lightning randomly every single time you swing it, or unique craftable weapons with special attributes. Where things start to get really spicy though is the possession skills. You see, every time you hit an enemy with your weapon, you generate energy which fuels a set of magic attacks. They have iframes, you can combo into them, and they're some of the most damaging skills in the entire game. These two systems alone create their own incredibly fun and rewarding feedback loop as you charge skills by doing damage, cash it in for even more damage, and going right back to building meter. Considering energy charges so quickly and falls off outside of combat, you have every reason to go nuts and just have fun using your abilities basically on cooldown. It's all so tightly tuned, so even though combat looks hectic, in practice it's very readable, with everything balanced around carefully taking note of enemy movesets and adapting accordingly to avoid damage. And the balance for the internal cooldowns for moves like your backstep or shield bash are excellent. They're not too long, but they're long enough you can't just spam them without taking a hit, pushing you to alternate between them really smoothly. And these systems are so addicting, create such an insanely fun combat loop on their own, it would probably be enough to carry me through the entire game. But the cherry on top is how intertwined with combat the rest of the mechanics are. You see, this is an RPG with a capital R, and you'll absolutely get bopped if your stats aren't good enough. Plus, you're constantly going to be using items like torches to navigate or pickaxes to mine materials, so keeping a stocked inventory is kinda key. In a lot of games, this means taking a detour every few hours or so to farm for a bit, which, let's be real, can get old real quick in a lot of JRPGs. But Queso managed to keep Astlibra fun in two ways that, if you think about it, are so simple, it's kinda crazy. First of all, there are so many rewards in the form of skills, unlockable passives, craftable items, and more throughout the entire game that you always have something you're chasing. And every enemy you kill, even trash mobs, can be valuable, because even if you just need a bit more gold, you're almost always going to walk away with something unexpected and useful as well. Allow me to explain. Like any RPG, whenever you kill a monster, you'll get standard experience points, but in Astlibra, every kill also gives you weapon and armor XP for improving your gear stats and unlocking passives that can be equipped at any time, like Nier Automata's OS chip system. You'll get experience for directly boosting character stats and unlocking new possession skills in their own separate skill tree. Enemies will drop randomized chests containing anything from rare items to unique crafting recipes and more. Not to mention, just about every item you pick up is potentially useful, because even if you're never going to touch that revived doll, it can be used to give you unique passage through the scales of Libra, where every item is assigned a point value that will give you more benefits the more precisely you're able to balance the scales. There are so many systems working together and talking so smoothly with each other that your pace never really feels disrupted, even when you step away from the story to farm for a bit, largely because any time spent always feels incredibly worthwhile and makes engaging with the already incredible combat even more rewarding. And the game maintains this flow of earning, unlocking, and experimenting all the way through the post-game even. You are still unlocking new mechanics and gear even after the credits roll. It's kind of crazy. And the game keeps itself fresh by giving you this ability to save and swap between builds on a dime, really helping keep that gameplay from getting stale. Astlibra Revision is an insane package. My final playtime for my first playthrough clocked in at around 60-ish hours, and I know there is tons I haven't seen yet. As incredible as Astlibra's combat and progression systems are, though, they aren't everything this game has to offer. In fact, the overall flow of this game, the lack of hand-holding and the problem-solving mindset it inspires is also one of its biggest strengths. It's a lot like classic early 2000s games in the sense that it'll often give you a general idea of what to do next, but the precise details of where you need to go or what you need to do once you get there may be a bit unclear, leaving you to figure it out through context clues or by piecing together pieces of information that may have seemed entirely irrelevant mere hours before. And your understanding of the information instead of just haphazard guesses can be more important than you'd expect, because there often aren't even button prompts to guide you. You just have to know exactly where to go, what item to use, and where to use it. For example, there's this chest, and I'm gonna be vague to avoid spoiling things, but out of the blue you're given this chest that can rewind the time of any item. And you're told, hey, right now, on the spot, choose what you're putting in the box from your entire inventory. You aren't given a prompt or real guidance, just a box, and told to pick one of over 100 items to put in it. And I was stumped for a sec, wondering what the heck the game possibly wanted from me, before I remembered an item I had picked up and forgotten about, no joke, almost 13 hours ago. As I realized if I restored that one item, it would solve this entirely unrelated issue I was worried about, and bingo, got it in one. The way this world, its quest and overall exploration are structured around actually having to use your brain to put two and two together to an extent is just a really strong breath of fresh air. And look, I know this kind of vague approach can get annoying at times. Quest markers exist for a reason after all, and considering there's also no map, it can be very easy to get lost, and even easier to miss stuff. But this game is really good about giving you enough information, and I think the level design does a pretty good job of nudging you in the right direction. Personally, kinda like a FromSoft game, it wouldn't feel half as satisfying to solve all the problems the game puts in front of you if it was clearer about, precise expectations. That being said, I could absolutely see it being kinda tough to play this game in between other games or step away from it for extended periods of time for all of those reasons I just mentioned. Odds are though, if everything so far is working for you, that won't be a problem, because as good as everything else is, the story alone has every chance to hook you in. That's because it gets weird, like in a really good way. Any given quest can go off the rails when you least expect it. It's a very dark tale involving time travel after all, and I can somewhat unironically say the Terminator may or may not be involved in the Demon War. It's really kind of a lot, but at its core, it's a straightforward JRPG story about a boy and a raven who have lost their memories trying to find their way home. And despite the time travel shenanigans, the story never loses the plot, if that makes sense. Like, as crazy as everything gets, as out there as some of the swings are, they never feel truly out of place, and I never really hit that point I often reach in the last 25% or so of so many JRPGs. We are just kinda tired and waiting for it all to end because the story petered out hours ago, and now it's time to listen to the worst villain in the game pretend his incredibly surface level takes are deep, like a 12-year-old who just discovered Reddit for the first time, and ugh. Queso clearly had a tale he wanted to tell, and he did an excellent job. This story is so good, I'd imagine for a lot of people it would still be worth experiencing even if the gameplay wasn't as good as it is. But it is that good. The entire game is that good, it's just incredible. And it's worth noting that's not entirely thanks to Queso. Interestingly enough, in the last year and a half of development, Queso was able to get assistance from a few people to really refine the game for release, including one of the founding members of Vanillaware, Shigetake, who drew some of the monsters alongside characters and more. While the industry can absolutely be very collaborative, you don't often hear about this kind of really wholesome support. Established developers working to help an indie across the finish line in this way, and I'm really glad they did, and did so in a way that preserves and respects so much of Queso's individuality. Because at the end of the day, that almost intangible X factor is probably one of the biggest reasons this game consistently feels like such a fresh and unique experience. Astlibra Revision isn't the most popular game in the world, and it never will be. It's a very specific kind of game made for a very specific kind of person by someone who truly loves the genre, and we don't get these too often. So anytime we do, it's something to celebrate, because even amongst a sea of excellent art, projects like these are the ones that really light up the imagination. Games that are hyper-focused on simply being fun and genuinely unique experiences instead of worrying as much about reaching the broadest audience or making the most money. Games like this are a big part of the reason I love gaming, and stories like Queso's are so insanely inspirational it's hard not to smile every time I think about them. Because I love the artistry and human creativity behind this industry and can't get enough of it. So if that sounds up your alley, subscribe, because I can't wait to share more excellent games, more brilliant stories just like this with you all. And if you love Astlibra as much as I did, or decided to give it a shot after watching this, let me know and let's talk about why it's fun. Okay, this is Editor Why It's Fun, sitting here knowing I might get comments about the FF16 drive-by, so I may as well just explain myself, and believe it or not, the fastest way to do so without cracking open the 10,000 plus word script I've had sitting around for months is by explaining how I feel about the 2012 classic. Angels Take Manhattan. Look, it's an okay episode of Doctor Who, not as good as Blink, obviously, but some good character beats, I thought. The only thing you really need to know for the sake of this discussion, though, is we're talking Doctor Who versus the Statue of Liberty, and the Statue of Liberty and all of its mini-me's have special time powers, and if they touch you, you get sent back in time, but in this episode they send you to the Hotel California, but it's in New York. Following so far? No worries, it only makes marginally more sense in the show. Anyway, at the end of the episode, these two characters die, but like, not really, they just get sent back in time to Manhattan. But we're all supposed to act like they died because we saw their names on a headstone, and ooh, spooky. And the only reason the Doctor can't just, go back in time and pick them up is there's a paradox in the time they were sent to. So if he went to Manhattan at the time that they were sent to Manhattan, the city would, I don't know, explode or something. The problem is, time traveler. These characters didn't lose their memories, they didn't die on the spot when they arrived there. Time traveler. They lived long, happy lives. The Doctor is probably in the same city as them all the time, cause time traveler, who can also travel through space and spend so much time on Earth in general, they make him president of the planet. This is just a weird non-issue Moffat tossed in there for drama instead of Rory and Amy just being adults about it and saying, we have lives now, we can't be flying around fighting fizz boppets or whatever all the time. Amy is busy modeling is launching her TikTok soon. But no, it doesn't really matter that structurally when it comes to any form of narrative consistency, this just feels half-hearted at best. They're dead, out of the show. Be sad, don't think, feel. And look, I'm really not the kind of person to ignore artistic intent in favor of pure narrative consistency, but when it comes to media, whether that's literature, TV, games, media in general, I feel like defining and abiding by your own internal logic does a lot to ground narratives that are a bit out there in terms of the subject matter they cover. And my biggest problem with this scene is how it doesn't track with the show's logic before or after this episode, in turn ruining any emotional gravitas the scene is supposed to have and robbing these characters of their nuance, seemingly solely for the sake of being more visibly, vocally, shareably dramatic. And that's exactly how I feel about Final Fantasy XVI's world building, its character writing, its anemic-ass combat, and Clive. Yeah, I own slaves, but I was not...